Hazbin Guarantee is not only even better than you already think it is, but it fixed Hazbin Hotel's opening number problem. By analyzing the songwriting in depth, we can learn what the secret sauce of this song really is, what they did so differently with the composition, lyrics, and storytelling this time around to avoid the same mistakes as Happy Day in Hell, and why it's all so important, not just for our enjoyment of the song, but for the story of Season 2 and beyond. Because even though I think that Happy Day in Hell is much better than the other Hazbin songs that fail on every single level from a songwriting standpoint, it is missing the one thing that every musical theater song needs in order to succeed. And as a professional musical theater performer and songwriter, running into songs that were so close to sticking the landing but blew up on the tarmac during Season 1 bewildered, frustrated, and disappointed me. However, given all that, it should speak volumes that I am so happy with Season 2. It is truly like night and day, and I am not alone. Many of you guys, even those of you who enjoyed Season 1's songs more than I did, told me that Season 2 feels different for you, but you can't put your finger on why. So this is Calxiyn, brought to you by my patrons and my YouTube members, here to make you care. Because whether you're a songwriter, an artist of any kind, or just a curious audience member, it is always that deep, and it's fun to find out why. I'm hoping that this will be the first video in a series that I will call Hazbin Hotel's Musical Redemption, where we will look at the Season 2 songs in depth to see how Hazbin fixed the various musical problems that Season 1 had. And this doesn't mean that every song in Season 2 is some flawless masterpiece, but rather, I can confidently argue that Season 2 addressed the many issues within the 4 quadrants that make up its usual musical problems with consistency. And since I already made a video about Happy Day in Hell, which we can use as a reference for our comparison, what better way to start than with Hazbin Guarantee, brackets trust us. As always, we are going to talk about the music, structure, satisfying sounds, rhymes, other fun lyrical things, and the characterization, as well as talk about key storytelling lessons for Charlie's section, Vox's section, and then both of them together at the end. But in order to break down Charlie's part of the song, I must talk about how much better the music in Hazbin Hotel Season 2 has gotten. I feel like I could make an entire video on that because I've noticed that even the score has improved in so many ways, and I don't really have cause to talk about that here. There's not a lot to talk about in the score yet, and we will revisit that when we cover songs like Don't You Forget. But basically, if you've never watched any of my Hazbin videos before, the TLDR is that my biggest problem with the songs in Season 1 was that many of them felt like that they were stewing in a single feeling with very little dynamic musical storytelling. And sometimes we would get large chunks of the song without any musical storytelling at all. Sections of the music were also straight up looped or copied and pasted, if you will, instead of the instrumentation changing to react to a new character singing. One of the biggest offenders that still baffles me to this day being Hell's Greatest Dad, where you literally cannot tell the difference between Lucifer and Alistair in these verses. You cannot tell when Lucifer stops singing and Alistair starts. Cases that literally keeps me up at night because the answer was right in front of us. It could have been as simple as changing the prominence of the instruments, and that would lead us nicely into the fiddle versus piano duel that we're gonna get later. But instead they did this, and I don't know why. For a simple example of a song that does do this so you guys can hear the difference, we can look at something there from Beauty and the Beast, where Belle and Beast have verses that are structurally the same, but her instruments are lighter compared to Beast's more dorky or heavier sound. It's an easy effective way to give the characters more musical personality. Whereas when stuff like this is just copied and pasted without any new musical flourishes, it feels static and repetitive. Despite the audience getting new information, the music isn't evolving alongside of it, which can make us feel like something is off without quite knowing why, or like the music has fallen behind. And on top of all this, a majority of the songs started at 60% intensity and maybe went up to 80, versus pulling back or growing to suit the emotional context. And this has been a trend with singers as well lately, where every note has to be the beltiest that they've ever belted, but the voice is also an instrument, and so when you play that instrument at the same volume and same intensity for the entire song, regardless of the lyrics and emotional context, you're not acting, and you're not really playing that instrument either. It just becomes noise. In the context of a musical, and this applies to both song and score, the music is its own character, which needs to make acting choices. And this is why I described songs like Whatever It Takes as PS2 shovelware title menu music. Static music in video games can have its usefulness for immersing us into a setting, but because musical songs take us on a journey, the composition has to capture the changes in a character's thoughts, feelings, emotions, and actions. And in Whatever It Takes and the other songs that stew, this stewing issue isn't just a problem in relation to giving Carmilla a musical character. It also matters in relation to Vaggie. They do not differentiate her musically from Carmilla, which means she never gets her own musical character. The same thing happens in Happy Day in Hell. Vaggie is just shoved into Charlie's song. It doesn't feel like her involvement in the song is musically represented. We say that a song in musical theater is a manifestation of a character's soul, and so because of that, the composition should feel entirely unique to that character. And this may even be more true in the case of animation, because a friend of mine who is a composer brought up to me recently that what I call musical theater reactivity is very similar to Mickey Mousing, where the music is scored to sync with the motion in the animation. So when you're doing an animated musical, it's that, but it's also synced to the lyrics and the emotional context and the acting choices that the songwriters are imagining. The reason I'm explaining all this now is to give context for why the reactive moments in these songs matter so much to me, and to you, even if you don't realize that you realize it. This is the stuff that I live for, and so many of my favorite iconic musical theater songs would not be the same without these moments. The first level of this is line by line, where the music is reacting to a specific lyric, say a chime when a character gets an idea, or our go-to example on this channel, the church music when Ursula claims that she has been a saint.
Yes, I've had the odd complaint, but on the whole, I've been a saint. To those poor unfortunate souls.
Even though the structure and the melody of these verses are the same, there are new musical flourishes because the music is reacting to that new lyrical information. Second, we have a more general character level, which we already talked about with our Hell's Greatest Dad / Whatever It Takes example, compared to something like Something There and how they defined the general characters for Belle and the Beast, but this is also true of solo songs. I don't want you guys to think it just applies to duets, is basically what I'm saying. We've talked about this previously in other videos with Preminger songs sounding like a mining operation, or Part of Your World sounding like the sea with instruments representing the bubbles floating to the surface. And with that foundation provided by the first two levels, we have our third level, which is how the already established elements interact with another character or in an ensemble number. Think about, for example, how Frollo's musical character is established in Bells of Notre Dame. This gives the audience a form of shorthand for Out There in Hellfire. And because this was planted or established early, when we hear it again, we're able to see the differences between him and Quasimodo. And through their musical differences, we understand their character differences or their moral differences. And for Out There in particular, this allows for something cool because we see how the song starts as coming from Frollo, with Quasimodo slowly morphing into Frollo's melody, but Quasimodo transforms it when he sings alone. Also, guys, I know that this video isn't gonna come out for a couple months, and so this is kind of like old news now, but I can't believe that I wrote about all this in the script before Sideways shouted me out, and then he came back with a Hellfire video. Like, I'm still freaking out about all that. Not just like that I got shouted out, but just the Hunchback in Notre Dame musical analysis goodness that we got. This reactivity is not exclusive to songs which you think sound like musical theater songs, because musical theater is not a genre, it's a medium of storytelling, and in this case, a compositional style that is paired with other compositional styles. For example, Hunchback is not musical theater genre. Alan Menken would say, and he actually talked about this quite recently, that Hunchback pulls on romantic classical themes, the Romany in their folk or performance music, as well as the music of the church. Whereas Aladdin is a spoof of the mysterious East and is influenced by music like Harlem jazz. Musical theater compositional styles are applied regardless of the song genre, whether it's pop, rock, disco, what have you, because the story is not served through just copying and pasting the exact same chorus 3 times like we may see in music for the radio. Now, all of that being said, Happy Day in Hell was better with its musical reactions compared to other Hazbin songs, but the expectation that Happy Day in Hell set just made the staleness of the songs after it more noticeable. They set a standard, and then most of the songs afterwards fall under that standard, and that makes them feel like downgrades musically. And as I mentioned, it still had problems, particularly with differentiating Charlie and Vaggie and the ensemble. So what exactly is so different about Hazbin Guarantee? So on a general level, Charlie's section does a great job at re-establishing her musical characterization for the audience while not being stuck at full throttle the entire time. Pulling back during Charlie's little breakdown section makes the moment feel more personal and intimate, and hearing Charlie spiral out of control musically makes the song actually feel alive. My favorite reactions are here when the brass comes in on Here's Your Key and we get this chime, a Mickey Mousing of Charlie handing it off. I also love the little join in with the melody on Wait Till You See. And we have this moment on Great, which I think is hilarious. It sounds like a clown car noise, but it's also almost like the music is laughing at Charlie. Now, usually I'd save this for our lyric section, but since we brought it up, I do have a little beef with this car situation here. So lyrically, this isn't here because this is information that we absolutely need to know for the sake of world building or character or plot. It is obviously here for the joke. But I feel like the joke just isn't exaggerated enough to its full potential, which it should be in order to justify a lyric that has no other purpose. We can workshop this together, like this is just off the top of my head, but I think it would have been funnier if we saw that the doors to the hotel were already open, but this guy chooses to drive through the wall anyway. If there was a more destructive moment, it would also make the contrast with Charlie being positive and welcoming even funnier. And it's also a reminder of what the sinners are actually like. And I know that you kind of get that because they were almost hit by the car, but I feel like it just would have been more if it's like, oh, well, they didn't just almost get hit by the car. This guy chose property damage because he relishes in destruction. And that would make Cherry Bomb blowing up shit later on purpose even more hilarious to me. You could even switch around the timing of these lines so Charlie says don't mind them or that hole, talking about the first hole that the car made, and then Cherry makes another bigger intentional hole. And is it that big of a deal? No, but veterans of this channel will know that this discussion is actually going great if this is my beef. Now moving on to the chorus, I love how gentle the instruments are and how they all join together on Hazbin Guarantee. It really gives that sense of imagine your new life with us like this is the dream. Especially with that da-na-na-na. Now when we move on to this section, even though it's structurally the same as what Charlie just did, you can hear how it's harder and less Disney princessy. It's almost like this is more grounded in reality to reflect who is singing, which is obviously Alistair, Nifty, the sinners, not the Disney princess Charlie. brass here after Nifty said, like, this place is sticky and covered in junk, because it's giving this tour is going down the toilet. Like, all of this is going down the drain very quickly. And I really love what they did with made a great choice to save your soul in that spiral into the quieter section, because to me, the spiral music is saying the thing before Charlie is. Like, they did make a great choice. Didn't they? Because redemption is possible, right? And so I think it really conveys her anxiety and fear before we actually hear what she's afraid of. Now, this is where I was really impressed, guys. I love the lightness in this section as Charlie is singing to herself. It makes me think of like a lullaby or a music box, and that sort of punctuates that this is what she dreams about. This is her hope. Then when she starts to spiral, we have the brass and I believe some chanting, as if the voices in her head are calling her a failure. Even though we can't pick out a particular voice actor here, like it's not like we're like, oh yeah, there's Adam in the back, right? You know, his voice actor has a very distinctive singing voice. It might not even be like the ensemble singing this. It might be the chanting that you find in a lot of music programs, right? That you can use as an instrument as opposed to live recorded voices. Anyway, even though we can't do that, we can imagine that Charlie, the character, is imagining her mom, for example, that her mom would be saying that she's been wasting her time, or even Adam saying, haha, your friend died for no reason, right? You should just give up on this childish fantasy. And it's really closing in on her. I just thought of this now, but I wonder if it could also be like the voices from above, like it could be a representation of heaven that she needs to prove that this is possible to like God. Obviously, we're not going to see like capital G God, but just like the concept of God. And like, I wonder if Charlie really does need to believe like there has to be some sort of justice. Redemption has to be possible, or what does that say about the person that made us? Or like in her case, her grandfather, you guys know what I mean. And I love the intensity of the violins here. It's all just so fantastic. And when Charlie returns to the verse, it is actually different compared to what we heard before. The first verse was brighter, but this feels heavier and more similar to what Alistair and the others were doing before. The lighter instruments here feel more occasional, and the piano has been noticeably taken down an octave. This is such a subtle change, but the audience will feel the difference. Listen to the difference as Vaggie comes in here with the swell of the strings, and we also have different instruments on the Hazbin Guarantee joining in. Fixes Vaggie just getting shoved into songs with nothing to represent her. To me, it feels like Charlie is being calmed down because of Vaggie's warmth. Like, there is such a strong sense of comfort in these strings to me. I also love this little flute flutter that happens right here because it feels like Charlie's heart is fluttering. Her spirits are raised again and she's regained some of the confidence that she lost during her freakout. Hence why now she's rallying all the sinners into this, like, clapping section. Now, here's something really cool about this, like, gospel-y call and response that Charlie's doing. The brass here reminds me a lot of the beginning of Bad With Us. And so it's cool that a similar sound happens here when Charlie tries, but fails, to convince the ensemble of the power of redemption, and by extension, her power to guide them. Whereas when this happens later, Vox is successful at convincing the ensemble of his power. Like, listen to this do-do here. It sounds like the do-do-do-do-do from Bad With Us completes it. Right? Am I crazy? Probably, so let's get into the structure. In our reaction video to this episode, you can see me literally cheer because of how consistent this is. In Season 1, Hazbin suffered from having sections that are supposed to follow the same structures, let's say verses, end up completely different from one another in the meter or in the rhyme placement. I mean, look at this song, guys. Now look at these songs that I've covered on the channel before. Now look at whatever it takes and stayed gone. Do I really need to say anything? Now, some of you may be thinking, Cal, this is the bare minimum, and you're right, it is. But my happiness isn't because this is complex or revolutionary. It's not, oh my god, the verses match each other, the Disney Renaissance is back just through Hazbin Hotel, what a masterpiece. Rather, it's because it's a noticeable and necessary improvement. Hazbin Hotel is very unique. Most musicals spend years or decades getting workshopped, and we don't really get to know what the earlier drafts were like. And though looking at Season 1 of Hazbin compared to Season 2 of Hazbin isn't quite the same as studying earlier drafts of the same song, seldom do songwriters have another chance at writing for the same characters after the musical is released. Like, even for Disney when you think about it, none of the Renaissance movies got theatrical sequels. If Alan Menken or Howard Ashman felt like they didn't do, say, Jafar justice musically or lyrically, they didn't get another shot. But we get to watch the same songwriters writing the same characters from season to season and learn from what they are deciding to do differently. One of the biggest areas of improvement throughout the entire season has been the structure, and so clearly they recognized that this was a problem that needed addressing, and they addressed it. And I feel like being able to see the massive difference in quality can help to impart the importance of things like content dictates form, form follows function onto new songwriters versus just talking about this song in a vacuum. It should speak volumes that the only thing that I have structure-wise is a personal thing. Like, I'm just not completely sold on Charlie going, and did I mention it's free? Even as a character moment where she's excited and she's running out of breath. Like, as a singer, I'm not convinced it sounds better than, did I mention it's free? Now repeat after me. But lyrics can get away with 1 or 2 syllables extra, and it's not egregious. And it might work for you, even if it doesn't work for me. If this is all I have to criticize, again, what a massive difference between this and my previous videos. Now for some satisfying sounds, some great stuff is happening here with take, till, but also tay, way for take and wait. I know holding them like that makes me sound kind of insane, but as a singer, there's just something satisfying about having these sounds here. Something a bit more obvious happens with par, car, will, val. Now, songwriters are not just sitting here like, yes, this is the vowel. This vowel will make my song amazing. It's just something that you start to train your ear for as you work and as you practice. And this doesn't just apply to songwriting either. I took a speech writing course in university as part of my public relations and professional communications stuff, and I found it really interesting how speeches have their own song-like musicality and rhythm. So even when I'm writing my scripts, I say things like what every musical theater song needs in order to succeed, or punctuates a point intentionally. Like, all of that is on purpose. I like the flow or the rhythm of the phrase, and hopefully it keeps you guys engaged for these really long videos. In this section, we also have the T's of wait and till back to back, which I always enjoy for a little bit of diction. Moving on, the all are and are of all our guests are family is really nice. Like, imagine if they wrote, each guest is like family. That's the same number of syllables, and that's pretty much like the same sentiment, but it's not as tasty. It's just not. We also have family, free, that's the, and I feel like that's the being back to back gives us the sense that we are building towards the reveal, which is really great. Again, they could have said that's our Hazbin Guarantee. It doesn't sound as nice as that's the. In this section with the group, we have full, floors, the C of that word that I can't say, and covered. And when Charlie starts singing again, we also have made and save, which sounds really satisfying together. I don't think it's like meant to be a slant rhyme per se. I think it's supposed to be the same as like par, car, or like the tay way situation that happened earlier. And then we also have save and soul, which is so satisfying. During the breakdown, we have redemption, really, if it isn't sounds especially nice to me, and of course we also have fucking, friend, no, never, from, fucking again, and front. And similar to what I said before about made and save, front and month share some of the same sound, like they are distant, very distant cousins, and that makes the phrase satisfying to sing. Then up here we have bar, beer, and then check-in, seek-in, all the little ins in the gospel section. I also just realized that we could add come on, wreck on into that too. I cannot stress enough how happy all of this makes me. Like, again, compare this to other songs that we've talked about on the channel. This all helps so much to make a song memorable and catchy and thoughtful, and it also makes you as a viewer excited to replay and sing along with it. One of my professors used to say that when the audience members can predict a rhyme before hearing it, they get a hit of dopamine and it helps the audience lock into the song. And I feel like this is true for satisfying sounds as well, because we're like, yeah, what needs to be saved? Your soul. Even though it's not necessarily as much as rhymes, there's still that push and pull between the surprising and the inevitable, the tension and the release, the suspense of knowing what the inevitable is and the satisfaction when we do get it. And of course, that segues us into what my professor thought did this even more strongly, rhymes. We have some pretty simple rhyming here with key, me, see, great, validate, beer, here. And if you've seen my videos before, you may be wondering what I think about this one having 3 rhymes, but this one not having 3 rhymes, and that does often annoy me. Like, I get annoyed when there is a section that includes an inside rhyme at first, so something like this, and then later sections it gets dropped, because it can feel like a momentum killer. The songwriters wanted to be clever, but they couldn't repeat that same cleverness all 3 times. Something like that can really feel like it is working against the story when that moment is supposed to be paired with a moment of triumph, right? Usually you'll have a verse that goes into the big chorus, the final one, that this is supposed to be the grand climactic moment. And so if you have a worse version of a verse that we already heard before, that's not just annoying, it's like the deflating of a balloon. You'll want each verse to be stronger than the last, but especially the last verse has to be the strongest one we hear. We're closing out the song. That being said, it's not that this is always wrong, it's just that we've never run into a case where that works better for the story. Until now, I think that this is actually the right choice for what's happening in the scene. Remember, this verse happens after Charlie has her falling apart moment, and so this could be signaling to us that she is becoming less confident in what she's saying compared to before. I mean, we see this in her energy too. She is clearly like frazzled, she doesn't know what else to say. And by now, you would think that Baxter would be convinced, but he's not. And that's very important for the story of the song, but also the season. And here's something interesting about that in particular that I thought of. It would have been so easy to go, we just know we're going to love it here. But this lyric cannot happen because it's not true. I think that's what Charlie wants to hear from them, and as she's writing this song in real time using her powers, that's the lyric she expects to go there to match what she did before. But they don't sing it because they don't feel that way. I can't say with absolute certainty that this is intentional, though in musical theater school, we were always told to just take credit for the cool things like this anyway. But I don't think it really matters whether or not they did this on purpose. It meant something to me, like the absence of something, the absence of that rhyme, leading me to think about it and like how obvious it would have been to do we're and here, drew my attention to what was not being said. And this is really the first sign of things to come when it comes to Charlie failing to convince people. So to me, not having the rhyme here disrupts what in any other musical we'd predict would be the inevitable for the story and the character moment. Like, oh, obviously this song is gonna end with Baxter being convinced and he's gonna stay here and we're all gonna hold hands and sing together, but no. And that is very cool. Now here's another thing. This is a song that opens the show, but it's not exactly an opening number. Like, this is not a song that introduces us to the world and the characters and what they want, at least on the hotel side, right? We know all of that if you watch season 1. If you started the show on season 2, yeah, I guess it would be an opening number for you. Anyway, it's not really an opening number, it's a convincing song. Baxter says he's gonna stay here anyway, but Charlie is trying to convince him to stay here for the right reasons, and she's doing this with everybody else as well. And she is not succeeding. But put a pin in that for our characterization and storytelling discussion, because we still have more rhymes to do, apparently. We have wait and great. I do feel like that those lead into each other somehow, even though like they're kind of far away from each other. And obviously we have family, guarantee, free, and me in the course. All very simple and clean rhymes that are in the same spots when we hear those sections again. Now we need to talk about this verse having slant rhymes, whereas before Charlie had perfect rhymes, because in the past, a complaint that I've had is that there is an over-reliance on slant rhymes in Hazbin Hotel, and that when they were used, it didn't feel purposeful. As Sondheim would say, a perfect rhyme snaps in the word, and with it the thought, vigorously into place, rendering it easily intelligible. A near rhyme blunts it. I like to say punctuating a point, of course, or you can think of it like when you're getting your blood drawn and they can't quite get your vein the first time. Like a slant rhyme is like, oh, they gotta go back in there and wiggle around, and I hate needles. You gotta lock that shit in the first time. As Sondheim also says, 2 generations of listeners brought up on pop and rock songs have gotten so accustomed to approximate rhyming that they neither care nor notice if the rhymes are perfect or not. Pop songs have many values, including the immediacy of feeling that X refers to, but specificity of language, a sine qua non of good writing, is not one of them. Using a near rhyme is like juggling clumsily. It can be fun to watch, and it is still juggling, but it's nowhere near as much pleasure for the audience as seeing all the balls, or in the case of the best lyricists, knives, lit torches, and swords being kept aloft with grace and precision. And I am firmly on Sondheim's side when it comes to all of that, but I also think what he said here reveals when slant rhymes are useful. Perfect rhymes are the strongest choice when you want to punctuate a point, but what if you don't? What if you want to build tension or suspense or create a sense of bitterness or discord and deprive the audience of pleasure? I think that imperfect rhymes are great for that. I like this example, so I'm gonna use it again, but a perfect rhyme would be something like name and same, whereas a slant rhyme is something like name and gain. And this may be very biting in a certain context, like you used me for my family name, for your financial gain, etc. Other than guidance and violence, which are in the talk clapping situation and get a pass because nothing rhymes with violence anyway, there are only 3 other slant rhyme instances. Family, which I feel like you can take a lot of meaning from, that the Hazbin family is imperfect, but really functions more so to me as making sure that guarantee and free sound more secure. When we hear guarantee, especially the second time that we hear it, it snaps in. It has this feeling of sureness, and that's what a guarantee is. You are sure that something is going to happen. You wouldn't get that feeling if you used perfect rhymes here. Our next instance is the see you next Tuesday situation and junk, which at least has drunk to kind of sandwich it in there. But this is sung by the hotel crew, who is imperfect. And then down here we have hope, joke, and cope. And to me this feels especially purposeful. Hope and cope are what Charlie wants. Her whole life being a joke is what she's afraid of. Joke doesn't fit into her hopes and dreams, and so it doesn't fit in here. It sticks out, it hits our ears differently. This is not clumsy, it is a choice to tell us something about the character and how they're feeling. And we can see the intentionality of this in how Charlie doesn't even end this phrase with a rhyme. Think of it this way. Charlie can make a song out of almost anything, right? We see her do that at the beginning of season 1 when she sings after she gets the call with Adam. We see her sing again in the meeting with Adam. She sings to explain her hotel in the pilot. And she has the song to rally the cannibals. But we are seeing this song fall apart in real time, because she is falling apart, and I just think that that's super cool. And I sort of hinted at that earlier, but again, this is why I don't have a problem with the here in beer situation and the lack of inside rhyme. So now that we've gone through all the mechanical stuff, let's talk about Charlie's character here and the meaning of the lyrics. All of this is pretty straightforward. It's not like parking the car is a metaphor or a euphemism or anything like that. The songwriters got key as a literal thing and a metaphorical thing for free, just because at the hotel they have physical keys and not like swiping key cards, but I do think that this was an intentional choice on the part of Vees. So it still does matter here. When we talk about the idea of a liminal space for transformation, especially in fairy tales. For example, a character like Little Red Riding Hood getting sent into the woods and she comes back from the woods changed. She is forced to grow up and change. But when a character has a key, they are making the choice to go on the journey. They decide to unlock something deeper within themselves. The liminal space on the other side of the door facilitating that transformation. And so I just think that's neat. I also think the repetition of great holds something interesting, because down here, Charlie could have said you made the right choice to save your soul, or you took the first step to save your soul. But instead, she repeats a word that was already used. Obviously, it depends on the context, but we try to stay away from reusing words as songwriters unless it's explicitly for repetition or something of this nature, because it can make our vocabulary look limited. But it feels like in this case that our attention is supposed to be drawn to that she's trying to reassure herself that everything is so great even though it's not. The hotel is great even though all these people are here for the wrong reason. You made a great choice to save your soul, Baxter, even though you haven't. That's not why you're here. Don't worry about the fact that the last person that made that choice got murdered. I also feel like we got a lot of mileage out of all our guests are family this season, because there are many times, many times, where Charlie has completely lost the plot and actually neglects the guests of the hotel despite claiming this in the first episode. And the big lesson for her is her needing to focus on what actually matters, helping the people who stayed, not trying to change the opinions of Vox and his viewers. Charlie's growth is really cemented when she and Emily risk their lives to save the sinners who are not at the hotel, who are actually in Vox's district. They are the people that have been heckling her and supporting Vox. But she does the right thing because that's who she is, not because she's trying to clap back or prove anything. And even though she didn't do it for this reason, this ultimately does change the public's opinion on Charlie. Though Hunter and I have a lot of criticism for how Charlie's arc was handled this season, spoiler alert, we think most of it was shittily written, that's not the song's fault, and I think the song does a good job at planting the seed for what the conflict is going to be with Charlie. The song's job is to ultimately serve the story. It is out of their control if the people tending to that seed later in the script did not let it grow properly. There is a double meaning to be found on Alistair's line, though. On the surface, you can take this as Alistair saying that staying at the hotel is worthless. But in the past, Alistair has also expressed gaining something out of being here, saying, "It's been a surprising thrill to witness these wayward souls find connection." I don't see why he would lie to Nifty, and so I think he does derive some sort of entertainment or pleasure out of all this. I just thought of something. Obviously this season, he's a little cranky and he tries to quit, but that's because of his injury. And as you guys saw, I actually just thought of something. It's actually two things. If he's saying that it's worthless, could it be because whatever him and Rosie were trying to do or look for here isn't here? So there could be a deeper level of this where it's like, this is worthless and this was a waste of my time because there's nothing here? Or could it be that Alistair is reassuring himself that it is worth the price? That staying at the hotel is worth it for what he got from Rosie? So if you include all that, we actually have 4 different meanings here. But I do want to believe that under the surface, he is saying that the price is having to put up with these insane drunks and Australians and Charlie singing all the time and all that other nonsense, but if you can get past all of that, there is something here that makes it worth it. Either way, it is clearly a dig at Charlie and the hotel. It's just like a choose-your-choice situation. I do think that there is more to it, especially with Vox being like, what does Alistair see in the princess and her crappy hotel anyway? A few times this season. Like, they keep drawing attention back to Alistair's interest, and so I feel like that there has to be at least a double meaning to this line. And this is kind of random, but with what Husk says here, I wonder if it's supposed to be a reference to Cheers. I've never watched the show, but we have Pluto TV, and if you guys don't know, like, basically they show commercials for their other channels, so we'll be watching, like, Love It or List It Vancouver or whatever, and then there'll be, like, the Sailor Moon channel, and so I guess there's just a whole Cheers channel, and I have heard, does anybody want a Mai Tai? And then we want to go where the people go, or whatever the opening song is, like 100 times in between writing this script and recording. But the real meat of this section is what Charlie sings to herself, and this brings us to the first big key storytelling lesson of the video. In my Happy Day in Hell video, I discuss how one of the biggest problems with the song is that it fails to give us Charlie's super objective. See these videos for more, but Charlie's super objective is not open the hotel, prove redemption is possible, and redeem people. Those are goals that contribute to her true ultimate desire. Quasimodo's super objective is not to go to the festival. The festival is a goal that contributes to his desires for acceptance, to be part of them, not above them. Ariel's super objective is not to marry Eric. It is to be accepted and understood, which she thinks she'll find on land. Belle's super objective is not really the adventure in the great wide somewhere. She thinks by leaving town and going on an adventure that she'll find someone who understands her. Acceptance isn't the only kind, but it is the one that you find a lot with musical theater protagonists. For other characters, though, it may be legacy or power. But as I talk about in these videos, much like Disney's modern heroines, Charlie is presented as wanting to help people because she's so good and she cares so much and she's so nice, ooh woo, but this makes the song stakesless and oomphless. Surprisingly, not a musical theater term, that is a Calxiyn original. The oomph or the oh shit usually happens at the turning point moment, but it doesn't always have to be. It's just the thing that captures their truest desire and their deepest fear, and through that, the most vulnerable part of the character that we get to see. So something like this peasant son won't turn and run because some reckless royal chose another beau, that is the oomph, that is the oh shit, we are finding things out about Preminger that recontextualize this entire song. He is not just like a greedy aristocrat, he came from nothing, he was poor, he no longer wants to work in the mines, whatever. Ariel's whole thing here is another oh shit. And after the character sings it out loud, there is no going back. They are transformed by singing this song, and our relationship with the character changes as well, because we truly know them now. For the heroes, we want to see them get their happy ending. And for the villains, this means we know how truly desperate they are, and through this, how dangerous they will be. So all the way back then, when we talked about Charlie, I argued that under the surface, the oomph is actually, and if I can prove the hotel works, I can bring my family back together. Because they've planted this ideological disagreement between Charlie, Lilith, and Lucifer. Her true super objective is about her legacy in relation to them, finding a new path forward for all of them, and fulfilling her destiny in this world, answering her calling, if you will. And this is why the end of season 2 is so important. Charlie has been so concerned with how she's perceived that she is acting insane, but her actions were always enough to forge her own legacy, she just had to take the right ones. And season 2 reinforced the family angle with Charlie saying,
I got so caught up in all the drama and my mom... Look, this hotel was my way of finishing what she started, and I think I've been trying so hard to hold on to it because if I could make it work, maybe she'd be proud of me. And maybe she'd come back and tell me what I did to make her leave.
But this is not something that should have taken 1.5 seasons to hear. And one of the biggest failures of Happy Day in Hell is how this is not addressed. One of the greatest strengths of a musical number is the ability for clarity, and a character being able to explain what they want in a direct way that would be weird in other mediums. And you may be thinking, but Cal, how much does the audience need spoon-fed to them, really? And to that I redirect you to all of the people who were arguing with me during season 1 and still during season 2, saying that I was wrong and Charlie had no selfish motivations whatsoever. And how that's not actually what she wants. Even though Alistair literally said that she worked through her daddy issues by fixing the sinners, but anyway. And here's the other thing. We can feel pretty secure in our reading of subtext, but it's not really about knowing or not knowing. I knew this about Charlie since season 1, but what we lose is the intimacy of her expressing that to us. That is what makes a personal connection with the audience. And so when she doesn't express that in Happy Day in Hell, it becomes a problem because the personal motivations and the stakes are what moves us, not the, oh, I want to save the world because I'm perfect and good, ooh woo. Those personal stakes are what makes a character vulnerable to us. You can't have a character be vulnerable if they are not afraid or threatened personally by the nightmare scenario of wickedness winning. And what I find really interesting is that Charlie was originally going to call Lilith after every episode in season 1 and this got cut for time. I'm presuming because of this, because they wanted to show how Charlie was struggling with everything on a personal level. But you know what would have taken no time at all? Adding 2 lyrics to Happy Day in Hell to express, and if I can't do this, what's the point of my existence? And if the hotel works, my dad will have to admit he's wrong, or whatever the fuck. Which also would have set up Lucifer's opinion of the sinners, that they are not worth Charlie's time or energy, which is something that happens later. Happy Day in Hell's biggest musical theater sin is just repeating the same thing over and over again, like making the same joke instead of giving us new information. We could have gotten something personal instead of like, oh wow, this place is so horrible, but boy do I love it for the 6th or 7th time. But Hazbin Guarantee addresses this. Could we have gone further? Obviously, I literally just explained how we could go further. Even this doesn't exactly tap into all of that. But when I heard this for the first time, I took it as such a big win. Earlier, I talked about the intimacy in the music and how this part makes the song feel dynamic rather than static, but it does that on a lyrical and storytelling level too. It gives Charlie personal stakes and a reason to root for her success this season. No one wants their parents to be disappointed in them. This is about her legacy, her pride, and fixing her family. If any soul can change, so can Lilith and Lucifer. This makes Charlie so much more compelling compared to season 1, and so even when I got annoyed with her other writing this season, mostly episode 3, but we'll save that for another day, I was at least able to understand what was causing her to spiral. A truly selfless, entirely good ooh-woo type person with monk-like discipline would have just let Vox say whatever the fuck and focus on redeeming the people at the hotel. But Charlie lashes out at Vox because she thinks that he is in control of her legacy and that the ability to fulfill her destiny lives or dies by people's perception. But the big lesson for Charlie is that Vox doesn't. Her actions were enough. They have actually been enough the entire time. Enough to make her heroic or foolish. For example, this extends to Lucifer as well. Vox captures things. He reflects. He cannot create anything without them acting first. He doesn't trick Lucifer into embarrassing himself. Lucifer acted like a fool and got caught in 4K. She became the fool that they were perceiving her as the more she tried to fix it. But as I alluded to before with Emily and the finale, when she started to act like herself again, she was effortlessly able to change people's hearts. And this is a theme that really carries through for the entire season, that it doesn't matter how you are judged. If we go back to Sarah, for example, Sarah hasn't suddenly fallen into hell because she has sinned, but she still considers herself a sinner. These characters ultimately have to do right by themselves. If you're enjoying the video so far and you feel like that you learned something, go ahead and subscribe, or leave me a comment with an apple emoji so I know that you got this far, compared to the people who leave me all their unhinged comments about how I am a hater and how I will never make anything as successful as Hazbin Hotel, thinking that I am just indiscriminately shitting on the show when that could not be further from the truth. But now we get to talk about my favorite part of the song, which is the Vox part. Hi, we're gonna talk about Vox today. Archie, are you gonna help me? Are you gonna help me analyze the song? Archie, should we say Rip Vox, you would have loved Gargura, or Rip Gargura, Vox would have loved you? Vox's section contrasts so beautifully with Charlie's. You hear a magical Disney princess sort of sparkle sound, and then this gets drowned out and muffled by Vox. Even the Vox section plays with contrast within itself, with Sam half saying there are a lot of synth layers that are supposed to sound like his hypnotism, and there are also parts that have a more hip-hop or contemporary influence, which I assume is not only representing Vox like getting with the times, so to speak, but also Velvet and Valentino. And this is combined with the jazzy brass and the musical theater influence. We hear this held string, which causes the sense of tension, and when Vox starts, we hear that bass. We also have these claps here, which I think are some sort of shaker, and it's interesting how Velvet and Valentino get this one that we hear during this part. But also these little quicker ones. I have no idea what this whoosh sound is, but it reminds me of when a kettle is going off, and so it gives a nice sense of tension and release that we are building up to Vox appearing in this scene. I found the whooping to be a bit annoying when I was listening to the instrumental to write this section of the video, but in the actual show, I didn't really hear it at all. And I think it's interesting that they should choose a bass in combination with Vox's voice, because basses tend to be foundational or at least supportive instruments. Though Vox will play the piano in later songs, there is no piano, no electric guitar right here. We are supposed to be listening to him, and so the instrumentation forces us to focus on his voice. Even though there's not a lot of musical reactions other than this thing bridging Vox's section with Velvet and Valentino, I would argue that this choice in of itself is a reaction. And even though the instruments feel a bit reduced, like this is what you would find in a band compared to a Broadway orchestra, you can still tell the difference between Velvet and Valentino's section and Vox's, and I think that that's what's important. This part of the song is just more upbeat, it's more energetic to reflect their personalities. And again, that shaky thing gives their part some energy, and it shows how Velvet and Vox are adding to Vox's plan and onto his philosophy in general. And here's what I think is so genius, you guys. Out of every instrument that they could have chosen, they decided to put a shaker here. In a moment showing how Velvet and Valentino are what? The movers and shakers of hell! I just crack myself up sometimes. I don't know how intentional that was, but like I said, in theater school, we were always told to just take credit for it anyway, and so the songwriter should totally say that this was all on purpose. We also have a musical theater reaction here on the word snip with the clap and a nice Mickey Mousing moment in general. Finally, during the chorus, we get this piano that is joining with the melody here, following the ooh, and then the you, and helping the build-up here. Vocally, these oohs sound so hypnotizing. It conveys the manipulation of the Vees perfectly, but also why it's so easy for them to do so. Why people fall into this trap. Because it is beautiful, it is fun to sing. You can't help but sing along with them. It's an invitation, it's enticing. I'm not entirely sure what's doing the quick strumming here, but I really like it. And the piano gives this feeling of walking on air, floating above everyone else, and this happiness of being chosen. But that quick strumming gives the sense of adrenaline that this girl must be feeling, and also musically foreshadows the more insidious intention of the Vees. There's something darker or more shady about it compared to Charlie's genuine light. Now, when we return to Vox and Valentino, deceptively, it seems similar to how Vox opened, but it feels heavier. Listen to them side by side. meant to mimic how when Charlie got another verse, it was taken down the octave like after her breakdown, but this part of the song was already pretty low, so whatever's going on here is a bit more subtle. The shaking also gets added at their same aggression level when Valentino and Velvet start singing, which is a nice touch. Again, I can't stress this enough, but in songs like Happy Day in Hell or Whatever It Takes, Vaggie didn't even get a sprinkling of her own instrument. So I really like how they made more of an effort to signify Valentino and Velvet, even though there aren't as many instruments here because of the contemporary sound that they're trying to go for. We also hear this instrument that literally sounds like a siren or alarm bells. And I like how this siren sound carries through all the way into the scratch that they changed the channel section, and how it goes from a warning to, I think, actually joining Vox on the melody. Even though Vox is like talk singing, it's like this is what it would be if he were singing. Like this is what the notes would be, and so the siren sound is taking on those notes. And I think this is one of the only times where there's such a prominent melody underneath Vox, like to this extent. Again, instead of being in opposition to his voice or doing some sort of like counter melody thing, it's unified with him. And so at the beginning, we have nothing, it's just supporting him. Now we have a little bit more, but it's still not doing anything different. It's all in uniform with Vox. The instruments cannot go off and do their own little thing. It's amplifying or reinforcing his words, not creating some fancy different thing underneath him. And even though the chorus here is similar, they've added these snaps to it, and I feel like the piano and the quick thing in the background do sound slightly different, but I'm not sure how, so take a listen. There is actually some really interesting stuff happening with the structure here in both the meter and the rhymes. Snoring/boring being 2 syllables, but rewarding being 3 makes it stand out, like Vox is truly offering something greater than Charlie. Because there is this growth from the 2 to the 3, there is literally more. When we hear a little boost, there is literally a little boost, because I sense a drop of star potential. With a little boost, that drip could turn torrential. Again, I don't think that songwriters are sitting here like, oh, we need to make this 11 syllables somehow, or we need to make the rhyme potential rhyme with something with R's in the middle so it's more sounding. Rather, they can just hear what conveys that sense of growth, and doing this just accomplishes that because we're going from less to more. But what's interesting rhyme-wise here is that rewarding is not perfect. And to me, this hints at there being an element of dishonesty here, because when we go down here, tower, flower, and power are all 2 syllables, and this is all true. If you do go down to V Tower, they will help their talent flower, right? Technically, all of that is correct. Now, how they do that and how they expose them is something that we'll see later on, but none of this is a lie. At the end of this, the structure, which was similar to potential and torrential, deviates with the lips, strip, snip, because this is an alternate form that leads us into the chorus. But when we circle back with Vox and Valentino singing this verse, what we previously heard again, there is 1 less syllable and no rhyme in the spot where rewarding was before. This, to me, is conveying to the audience how the rose-colored glasses are coming off, and how the situation is taking a turn here. There is a blunt abrasiveness to take all these starring roles like it's being shoved into your arms, that you're being ordered to do it without having any say. And then on top of that, we have exposed not even slant rhyming, really, with holes or rolls, at least not to me. It's too much of a deviation. And this, I think, is supposed to show us how the promise that Vox made got broken. He said that this vocation would be more rewarding. Now it's not, you're totally overexposed. This is a great use to me of familiar but also surprising yet inevitable, all of that fun stuff. Because now we can't sing along, we have to pay attention. It's not predictable anymore, and this gives us a sense of uneasiness. Whereas over here, when we hear tower, we're probably gonna think even subconsciously, oh, of course power is gonna pop up. But over here, we can't predict what's gonna happen next lyric-wise. We aren't sure where the scene is going. And Velvet only reinforces that when it gets to her part, with this also ending unevenly. At first, it's they've seen way too much, and so we think, oh, it's so over. But then it's, oh, well, we can still get a profit off of you, and so it's like, okay, we're so back. And so this rhyme situation is reflecting the uncertainty and the tumultuous nature of this industry, and also what this girl must be feeling right now. And then Vox switches it up with no warning, which gives us total whiplash. Like, how the fuck in these 5 seconds did we go from, yeah, we can still make a profit, to never mind? Like, I think that they probably could have, they just didn't want to put the effort into doing so. Then we have channel, scandal, and canceled, with canceled not perfectly rhyming, sort of like rewarding in this situation that happened over here. The trio rhymes are on the inside, similar to sick and clicks that we heard before, with fun done run leading up to this reveal that Vox is letting this girl go, after using and exposing her. If they had changed this so the previous 2 rhymes would have perfectly rhymed with canceled, it would lose its harshness, it wouldn't hurt as much. But because it doesn't completely rhyme, it sticks out to us, and that makes this entire situation feel more bitter and like we were caught off guard. And this goes back to what I said about Sondheim earlier, because the career of this girl has been cut short. It is incomplete. The audience is not supposed to derive pleasure. The balls are not being juggled in the air anymore. Everything is crashing down. Now, obviously, audience members are like onions. We have layers of enjoyment, right? Just because you do not root for Gaston, for example, during the mob song doesn't mean you don't enjoy the mob song sequence from a craft level. I mean, that's what the Disney Villain Bible is basically getting at with their discussion about villains, that they horrify us but also fascinate us, they make us laugh, we enjoy to see them on screen, right? But what I'm basically saying is that even though Sondheim was talking about that from a craft perspective, that we get pleasure out of seeing the craft and not necessarily like what's going on screen, what I'm saying is that I think when you match those things together, when you match this craft choice with the emotional choice of what the audience is supposed to be feeling, or at least what this character, this girl, is supposed to be feeling, that can make a really strong impact, as opposed to having all perfect rhymes just to have them. I guess a way that we can put it is that I get more pleasure at this being imperfect from a craft perspective, because it being imperfect also draws attention to what is going on story-wise, you know? But yeah, I just wanted to clarify that because somebody may be like, but Cal, Sondheim meant it this way. And like, I know how he meant it. I understand. I think that in this case, it causes a cool impact. So it's definitely something to think about. And this is where structure blends into satisfying sounds, blends into rhymes, but it's interesting how the internal rhymes here are really for the Vees, but the external ones aren't as much. We have these nice vowels in here with rolls, holes, the sound of no, the O in totally, overexposed, right? And that's not to her benefit, that's to the benefit of the Vees. The same situation is going on with sick, clicks, fun, done, run. Even killer and filler from before is about the Vees making this girl into something that benefits their image versus what the girl is actually gaining. All the Vees said in their verses was that they can help her be a star when she's backed by their power, which is technically true, it just didn't last. So all of that to say, that's why I think the structure changes or meter changes, as well as the imperfectness of the rhymes and how this changes, is all intentional. And so now we can go back to the top to talk about our satisfying sounds. I really like redemption and vocation sharing a similar sound at the end because it ties the words together. Of course, it's not a rhyme or anything, but it gives that impression of a vocation is more rewarding than what? redemption. And in terms of the alliteration, we have redemption, rewarding. And if we want to, I feel like we can also toss the re of redemption and then the C of scene and the re of rewarding in there for a nice little sound as well. We have sense, star, turn, torrential, and I feel like there's something really subtle going on with the I in with and also in little, like with a lit. And I also like that O in potential, torrential. But one of my favorite ones has to be that drip drop, and saying it back to back when I was writing the script made me realize how genius this lyric is. Like, when Hunter and I reacted to this, we didn't really give this line any thought other than drip potentially also having a double meaning with clothes. Obviously, Velvet is a stylist, but I kind of thought like, oh, that's weird that he would use the word torrential, you know? I didn't think anything of it beyond that. I was just like, oh, that's a weird line. I wonder what's going on with that. But the Weatherman backstory was in plain sight all along, you guys, and we just didn't see it. And this is gonna sound insane, but I'm sure that it's only the insane people who have stayed this long, so you can hear me out. What I find funny about this line is that we usually wouldn't say a weather presenter senses that it's gonna rain like the same way an animal can. They're just presenting information that is given to them by a meteorologist and probably a computer. You don't sense the drop, it's all predictions and math. But this is what struck me. Vox is now the perfect hybrid of machine and animal. Vox is a computer now. He is no longer just the face reading the teleprompter. He collects and processes and analyzes the patterns and the algorithm and the trends. But now he is also an animal. Even in his life, he seemed to have a natural instinct for talent and programming. We see this still after he dies with how he recruits people to Vox Tech like Baxter. But Vox is now literally a shark. He smells blood in the water, that this girl is vulnerable, but still good enough to be tasty. And adding onto that idea of sense, he is also metal. People that have metal plates and stuff in their bodies talk about being able to sense when it's going to rain or other changes in pressure. You may know someone that like, oh, my knee's aching so bad because they have a plate in their knee and then it rains the next day. And so maybe, in Hell's cruel irony, even though this is supposed to be a metaphor for her talent, all the rain stuff, right? It could also be literal. Because of how Hell remade him, he can literally sense all this now. Despite how far he's come, he'll never truly escape from being the Weatherman. All of that makes this lyric really work for me because, in my opinion, I don't think that you should be able to just do the metaphorical meaning. Does that make sense? Like, I think that it needs to make sense on the literal level and then you get your metaphor. Which is why I also don't like... Oopsie. This is why I don't like, and now your medium is getting bloody rare and stayed gone, because meat cannot get bloody rare. Like, the meat either is bloody rare or it isn't bloody rare. And like, people were like, oh, but Cal, it's a metaphor. But the metaphor has to make sense on the basic level. It would have been fine if they said that it was rotting, but it's the getting part of getting bloody rare that really bothers me. And so for any other character, I would side-eye sense a bit, but I think Vox can get away with it. If anything, maybe I gaslit myself into helping them get away with it, but it's fine because we take credit for things that weren't intentional when those things sound cool. And I think that all the ways that sense can connect to Vox sound really cool. But all of that aside, I feel like the other thing that makes this such a great lyric is that the language here is unique to Vox. Not just in the phrasing, right? Obviously, the weather metaphor because he was a weatherman, but also in the mindset. Like, have you guys ever heard "The Journey of 1,000 Miles Begins with Just One Step," which funnily enough is sung by another character that Vox's voice actor plays? But Vox has a lot of lyrics that fit in with that same sentiment, right? Rome wasn't built in a day. You gotta climb a little higher. Fish like to swim next to sharks. Like, it's this idea of like a little thing or like a little action and then that culminating into like a big thing. You start as the fish, you become the shark. You place the first bricks and then you have the palace. In the cut version of Brighter, before it was slit a throat or two, they did crack an egg or two, so you get that impression again. When you're baking, you start with the raw ingredients, 1 or 2 eggs, and then you get this like beautiful final product, the souffle. And so I feel like this is within the same philosophy that he had for himself, right? Like he was the littler thing, a drop, a fish, but he manufactured the conditions. He gave himself a boost to turn into the storm, the shark. It all starts with that single drop. I just really love this lyric, you guys, and I freaked out when I went back to this song and realized it, like that this foreshadowed the backstory. Season 1 really struggled with doing stuff like this, right? Like every song almost felt isolated in its own little vacuum, but here we have active foreshadowing to things that we'll know in the future, but stuff that is technically part of Vox's past. So it just feels like these are real characters who have lives now. They aren't just characters who are possessed by the songwriters to sing a little song that really doesn't have a lot to do with the story going on in the show sometimes. Moving on, of course, V and we sounds really nice, as does where, we, talent, tower, telling. We also have how, hot, which is really nice with those being like back to back with each other. And then similar to our with a little situation up here, I feel like there's something going on with no tellin' how hot you could get. I don't think I could explain it to you without again sounding insane. There's just something satisfying there as a singer, and those are the 2 points that I've identified it. And then let's start is really nice because we have those S sounds back to back, and then we have let and get more directly in here too. Even though strip and start are a little far away from each other, I do think that that helps me as a singer anyway, but the bigger one here is the strip and snip rhyme. But before I talk about that, with and fit kind of have a slanty rhyme situation going on here, kind of like the with and lit of little and all of that stuff. And of course there is killer and filler, which is more of our rhyme, but still is really satisfying to sing. I mean, all of these things make these lines so twisty and satisfying and really exciting, and it gets you in the rhythm as well. But I think that snip and strip is particularly genius because the harsher part of strip has literally been what? Stripped away or snipped away to make it snip. Again, I love how satisfying the ooh and you is, and also it rhymes. We also have gonna, game, the W of want and one. Outdoes and outbuzz is a nice rhyme, and even though I was a little bit suspicious of it as a word, apparently it is okay, so they can have outbuzz. Even if the Vees made it up, that would have been okay too. Like, I feel like that is definitely within their character. You wouldn't want a character who is like prim and proper making up words, but these two, they're the trendsetters. They can make up anything they want, but it is a real word, apparently. And I like how we have buzz in terms of social media buzz, but you could also think about it in relation to Vox, like the TV static, that buzzing. That electronic buzz that a lot of appliances have, almost like white noise that people fall asleep to. The reason why people do that is because it's kind of drowning out everything. And it's giving your brain something to listen to, but not something that you have to listen too hard to. Charlie's voice has been drowned out by now, which we hear happening when Vox first enters the scene. And I love the all you gotta do is trust us, just us. It's so simple, but it's so satisfying, and the audience would have been expecting it. As soon as they heard trust, we want to hear just. And we still have some sounds in this other section, like the star, mar of trademark, and thing, being over here. My performer brain also tells me that there's something going on with they've seen, but I'm not entirely sure what it is yet. And we also have will, still, which sounds really nice and twisty. And of course, we have still and souls. We have scratch and that, which is very satisfying to sing. Finished, fuck are the more obvious ones, and then we have kidding, building, which this is not a perfect rhyme, it is just a matter of the ending sounding the same. But I like this because this is not the time for perfection. Vox is actually kind of losing his cool here. Which is interesting because later in the episode, he's like, our brand is perfection. That was in regards to Valentino and Velvet's behavior. So it's interesting that now we would have this kind of imperfect moment from him. We also have that, they, changed, channel, sell, scandal. And I think especially this section, but even the first verse, really sells Vox's character better than last season. Though obviously Valentino and Velvet have this twistiness too, Vox is built off of a specific musical theater archetype, one that typically has patter songs. The classic example is You Got Trouble, but Vox's voice actor is also well known for being really good at this type of song. So him being fast-talking and twisty and clever is very important, and instead gone, I talked about why, but I felt like his fast-talking sections there were really clumsy, and I could kind of like see the songwriter master hand struggling, I guess. Like, you don't want to see the songwriter running on the hamster wheel in the background trying so hard, you know what I mean? But all of this feels effortlessly smooth and natural for Vox as opposed to forcing that cleverness. Now, what I find really interesting is that down here, this snip doesn't really rhyme with anything. I guess maybe you could make the argument for bitch as a slant rhyme. I'm personally not hearing it that much. But before they were snipping her so they could keep her, and so that rhyme is built up by lips and strip. But now they're just cutting her loose. Because we already heard a rhyme buildup in this section, when we hear the get the fuck out of my building part, we are going to expect the same thing to happen, except it doesn't, and so instead we notice the absence of that buildup. Yet the snip is coming whether it's been built up for or not, and so it's as sudden for us to hear it as it was for her. It's the surprising yet inevitable. I really love bitch, but, no, new, and then no one, of course, and I love how no one can outbuzz and no one outdoes us takes on a more sinister meaning here. Just think about it. In this game implies the presence of other players, that there are people in a similar industry to the Vees. Obviously, we see that with Alistair. But when we heard this the first time, it was we are the best at what we do. But this time we realize it's, oh, there is no one else out there that can help you. Either because those people suck or they just won't. Like, for example, Alistair is not in the movie film business, and so even if this girl wanted to be a film star again, he'd be, useless. But Alistair doesn't, take on staff. He doesn't have a bunch of talent that do his radio show. It's just him. There might be theater companies or types of media that Vox doesn't touch, but as far as we know, if she wanted to be a film star again, that would be impossible. And again, if somehow there's not only the Vees, they probably suck. They don't have as much influence as Vox has. They have milked this girl for all she is worth, and no one is more proficient at that than the Vees. Now, to wrap up this technical stuff before we get into storytelling, let's talk about the la 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 part of this song, because 99% of musical theater songs fuck this up, but here they didn't. In a musical, we do not just go ooh or la or because it sounds nice. If you're going to have a lyric that is more of a vocalization as opposed to a word, it needs to have an emotional purpose, like an O being a Shakespearean woe. A lot of musicals make the mistake of bringing in the contemporariness from pop songs, for example, without actually modifying these things so they have a purpose for the story. Poison actually did the really well because I took it as Angel pretending that everything is okay, trying to drown out Valentino, or just going along with Valentino when he doesn't really want to. So la la la, I can't hear you, and also oh yes, I'm pretending like my head is empty, Valentino, even though it's not. In Hadestown, the laws are because Orpheus literally does not know what this song is. He doesn't even realize that it's the song of Hades and Persephone's love until later, when he realizes the gods have forgotten the song of their love. First, he just knows that the song is in his heart, the song made a flower grow, and then later he's oh, this must be the song of Hades and Persephone. And in a way, the audience is never really privy to what those la la la's actually mean to Hades and Persephone, if there were actual words there. It seems like whatever the song was originally, only Hades and Persephone know. Because even when Hades hears this song from Orpheus, he also goes la la la, and so does like the entire cast and stuff. But I feel like that they know what the laws mean. It's just that we don't get to know. As Persephone says, and I think one of her cut verses, like that was in another life, that was in another world, right? The world of the gods. It can't be understood by us mortals. All we can sing is the song. But in other contemporary musical theater songs, and I'm also side-eyeing Wish and Moana 2 and Snow White and the other usual suspects as well, they are just doing it because pop music does it, and that really annoys me. It needs to mean something. Even the oohs here mean something. It's admiring her or pretending to. And then this turns into ooh, like, oh, we feel so bad for you, but here's an idea. This is how you can actually be useful to us in your worthless, pathetic state. If you know someone new, bring them to us, using this girl for the last time to recruit the next sucker. And in terms of what the laws mean for the Vees, I take this also as the Vees enjoying their work. It comes naturally to them. It's their little Disney princess singing while washing the dishes moment, but it's while they're ruining somebody's life. Now, what is my big storytelling lesson for this section? I really wish I had the villain Bible all the way back when I talked about Stayed Gone, because even though I do talk about like this concept, I just have better language to explain this point now. Basically, I argued that Vox was too pathetic and Stayed Gone to actually be a threat to Alistair, and the most annoying people that you've ever seen in a YouTube comment section were basically like, you don't get it, that's the point, he's supposed to be pathetic, even though that is a bad decision when it comes to us giving a shit. What is the point of rooting for Alistair if there are no stakes here and nothing to lose, because Vox is not an actual threat in Stayed Gone? It doesn't even make Alistair cooler or more dangerous or more impressive, because it's not impressive for a demon to take candy from a baby. And what would be the point of rooting for Vox if Vox is so pathetic that he has no chance to win against Alistair? Without a victim, you have no villain, and without a villain, you have no victim. Which means there are no stakes and there is no story. I do think we are supposed to root for Alistair, and so my problem with Stayed Gone is that he's not enough of a victim. He is not an underdog who comes back after 7 years and really has to fight to be heard again because of Vox's monopoly. In this song, Vox is literally a straw house that somehow sets itself on fire when it's hit by a light breeze. And I think a big problem here is that Vox attacks Alistair without the show actually showing us how much Alistair cares about his radio broadcasts, especially through his actions. Hunter and I rewatched the show so many times while we were making our videos, but I watched episode 1 and 2 again just for this section and I felt insane. Yes, we are told that Alistair hates television, but that is not the same as loving radio. I have been a YouTuber since I was 13. I cannot go even a few hours without thinking, oh, this would be a cool idea for a video, or oh, I need to do this for a video later, okay? And Alistair was a radio host, not only in his death, but all the way back when he was alive. When something is this important to you, you are always thinking about it. You need to do it like you need to breathe. You're telling me that Alistair, who is as upset and as salty as he is, and don't you forget, who was told by Rosie to go off the air for 7 years, who has been deprived of the thing that he seems to love more than anything else in the world except for killing people, maybe, and now can finally do it again, only decides to do a broadcast because of Vox? It doesn't make any sense, and it would have been so easy if they at least planted Alistair having plans to come back. Like, have Alistair tell Vaggie, I do this commercial for you and you give me a day off so I can make sure my return broadcast is absolutely perfect. To imply that Alistair has just been like so busy all week. I mean, I don't know what he's been doing other than filming that commercial. That didn't seem to take a lot of effort, but whatever. He's been so busy doing bullshit for the hotel that he hasn't had the time to do his show. And then in episode 2, he can be annoyed when he's doing his pre-broadcast tea ritual and Pentious attacks him. They couldn't even throw like an, oh, I don't have time for this, I have my broadcast today, or anything like that in this episode before he goes to the tailor. If the show had planted it earlier, we as the audience would have been invested in wanting Alistair to have this triumphant return. Here I am again after 7 years, only for Vox to come in and ruin it by running his mouth. That would make Alistair the underdog and it would make Vox the enemy. And if we really wanted to make this a thing, they could have had Charlie and Vaggie go to the Vees for production of the commercial and have Alistair feel insulted that way. And this would have been before Charlie found out the true nature of Valentino and Angel Dust's contract, and so that could have had some nice planting too, that Angel's kind of like, oh really, you gotta go to the Vees? And Charlie's like, oh why not? And we as the audience, unless you watched the pilot or saw the Addict music video, we still wouldn't know like the extent of the situation and why Angel feels the way he does, but ultimately he sort of swallows it and he's like, yeah, you're right, they are the best people in the business after all. And speaking of Charlie's non-existent relationship with the Vees until the Valentino episode, in season 1, episode 2, Charlie is freaking out about the news and how the sinners are panicking, but there is not a single inkling, not a single iota of a thought, of a brain cell, of trying to control the narrative through using Alistair's show. Anyway, in the actual show, Pentious attacks and suddenly, with zero buildup, Alistair is broadcasting again because of Stayed Gone. What the fuck were they thinking? And I feel like the only reason why Hazbin fans argue so strongly of like, well, they didn't need to show that, right? We already know that. It's not because of the show, it's because of the homework. But you can't expect the audience to do that homework, to look at live streams from 3 years ago and comics and stuff that may not even be canon anymore, to get this information and make us care. In the vacuum of the show, I do not know how much radio means to Alistair because I haven't seen that vulnerability in his character, that fondness, and so I have no reason to care about him or his beef with Bargain Bin Team Rocket in season 1. Especially when they're not connected to the conflict that we're supposed to care about, which is with Charlie and the Exorcists. And even after Stayed Gone, Alistair never uses his radio show or his influence to do anything! Not even when Charlie needs good press for the hotel in season 2! So why the fuck do we care? Why does it matter that Alistair is a radio host as opposed to any other kind of demon? It doesn't. And it should. And that's the real problem with Stayed Gone. But the more important reason I'm talking about this now, in the context of this song, is because Stayed Gone captures a bigger issue with how the Vees are handled in season 1. Vox presents VoxTech Angelic Security as something that the sinners can buy very early on, right? But this is before the Vees find out that angels can be killed. He makes up this bullshit on the spot. It's not a real piece of technology that they thought would work. So clearly whatever they sold would have been useless. If Stayed Gone had worked in, you don't need Alistair or the hotel. You can buy our product instead, since this is literally after the press conference, mind you, where Vox announces it, and this was a product that we know wouldn't protect people. That would be a reason for us to care about Alistair winning against Vox and taking him down, because Vox is now in opposition with Charlie and is putting the people that Charlie is trying to protect at risk. But their song is not about that. And the angelic security thing doesn't come up in season 1 again, which is literally insane! This is a huge gun that does not go off. They planted this and didn't pay it off at all. Does this moment tell us something about Vox's character? Sure. But if you're going to have something that directly connects to the angels, I expect to see it come back, that there's gonna be another exorcist attack where people are using this technology and then they die. But instead, we don't get any of that. What they also could have done was have Vox want to work with Carmilla to make the angelic security thing actually work, sort of like what happens in season 2. And so the conflict becomes convincing Carmilla to take Charlie's side or Vox's side, or I suppose Alistair's side, since this could happen at the Respectless meeting. The more I think about it, the more I want to make a Stayed Gone discussion part 2, because I really didn't scrutinize it harshly enough in hindsight. I was so focused on what was technically wrong with it, and yes, obviously we talked about the story, as we always do, but there was more to the story of how the story failed than I realized. But how this song fixes all that for season 2 is by actually showing how Vox and the Vees negatively influence the average person, whether it's a viewer or a talent. And because of a lack of exploring all those things I already talked about, it's only Angel's situation that we really get to see, whereas this opens up the world of the Vees to see how they treat the average person, so to speak. They make this girl conform to their beauty standards, which perpetuates those same standards onto the people in hell watching. They exploit her and then they discard her as soon as there's a hint of friction, instead of sticking with her and getting through to the other side of her cancellation. Vox of all people should know that no one is ever truly cancelled. But they want maximum profit with the least amount of effort, and suddenly fixing all this would take effort. And I think it tells us something about their characters, that they have this need for instant gratification. And even though later on Vox does see a big picture, he does make an overarching plan, I think for Velvet and Valentino, that's definitely the case. And Vox wouldn't know what the long-term benefits of sticking with people are, because the only person that he wanted to stick with rejected him. We don't really know how long the Vees have been the Vees. And as we see this season, he is willing to toss them aside too, and so why would this random girl be any different? Something else that we see this episode is Vox pumping in this negativity and discourse into these online and offline conversations on purpose. He manufactures the headlines so they are more negative, and so we can see how much toxicity he's really pumping into Hell's media ecosystem. All of this is just literally Tuesday for them, and that's more heinous because ruining someone's life is just business as usual. And another thing this does better than Stayed Gone is show us how genius Vox really is, though I feel like for most viewers it wouldn't have been something that they realize on the first watch, only after Brighter or after season 2 is over in general. Vox can't kill people in hell like he did on Earth, and so he has to adapt. Instead of just being a television host, he builds up this empire so he can control video while also being the face of it. Through being the person that makes or breaks the stars, he can ensure that he always shines the brightest. Yes, he can cut them loose before they are able to tarnish that brand of perfection that VoxTech has, but in this position, he also ensures that he can snuff them out before they can outshine him. I know that was a lot, but I hope that it showcases to you guys how this time they set up Vox to be an actual threat. Charlie redeeming people is bad for business. It means they have less talent, less viewers, less consumers, and sinners don't even need to go to heaven for that to happen. Even sinners trying to be good means less business for Vox. They won't buy Velvet's love potions or watch Valentino's adult movies, and the talent will be less desperate if they have somewhere else to go. They will be harder to exploit. And now let's talk about the ending. I love everything about this, you guys. To talk about music, this instrument underneath the come on in feels very this is gonna kind of sound weird, but have you guys ever heard the Here Comes the Bride, but it's on an electric guitar? That's how I feel about this. Somehow there's sort of angelic sounding or church-like sounding chords, but it still has Vox's instrumentation. You can still hear the lighter instruments right here, which I believe are a piano and a violin that are representing the Charlie section that we heard before. And we hear them all play together on how great your afterlife could be, and I love being able to hear that lighter "we can live in harmony" as well, but also having that darkness of the guitar in here. And I feel like that instrument in particular captures Vox perfectly. He has this very 80s sound later in Brighter. He talks about having a cult, even though it wasn't necessarily the televangelist stuff like we thought. And he does use religious language and costumes, especially later, but also in season 1 too. And so we see how this impacts his sound, especially when he's musically around Charlie. He has a lot of gospel or church-sounding music implemented into his songs after, like in Vox Populi, and so this is really perfect to plant those seeds now. And it kind of gives the music a double meaning, because the viewers at first may think, oh, that's supposed to represent Charlie, this is supposed to represent Vox, like that thing that I mentioned earlier with the chords. But it could also be foreshadowing that Vox is going to vie for almost Charlie's position and beyond her. He is going to want to become God by the end of the season. In fact, he wants Lucifer's position and everything beyond it. I really love this little twirly flute in this section and the instruments sort of fighting here on That's the Hazbin sign and cash in, and I love how this spirals. And I love how it ends with everything else falling away and Vox getting supported underneath his Trust Me, because it's Vox taking total control over the song again, and so he's the only thing that is heard and listened to. Everything is in unison with him. Something else that Hazbin Hotel does in Season 2 more than Season 1 is have characters sing overlapping each other. Like, one of my other complaints with Happy Day in Hell was that they should have introduced the other characters in a, if I could break my contract with Valentino, it would be a Happy Day in Hell kind of way with Angel. As long as I have my daughters, it's a Happy Day in Hell with Carmilla, etc. Like, show the people that are happy here, like Cherry Bomb, and like the now that the exorcists are gone, it's a Happy Day in Hell, let's get back to partying type stuff, and then who it's not a happy day in hell for, so they could all be united under the thesis. And then obviously we would pan to the Vees. If the Vees are on top, it's a happy day in hell, foreshadowing that Alistair will disrupt this. We can have the characters that don't want things to change, the ones that don't want to be redeemed, the ones that do want things to change, but either way, the happiness for the majority of the sinners would be from the fact that the exorcists have stopped attacking. Everyone could have had a different idea of what would make a happy day in hell, but they would have been united by the same thesis. And this way, for the people that hell sucks for, we can see how they suck, and it's framed as Charlie being the answer. And the ensemble becomes a tool to elevate Charlie's plan instead of to undermine it. In my Happy Day in Hell video, I talk about how frustrated I am with this. Like, no, it is not a shitty day in hell because this guy is shoving barbed wire up your hole. It is because there was just an attack and people died. Anyway, the reason why I brought all that up now is because I wonder if they were kind of nervous about having characters singing and overlapping in that classic, like, musical theater type way, because it is tricky, and they don't do it very often in Season 1. It still happens sometimes, but it definitely could have happened more, and it did happen more in Season 2. But it's really great to have that now. And I love how great your afterlife could be instead of just saying life. It's so simple and it's so obvious to do, but it's so good. And in terms of other fun sounds, we have we, why, when, and I'd even wonder if why and nigh in nice have something going on there. Harmony, be, key, be is all fine. But what I really love is that we finally rhyme Hazbin. It's so satisfying to finally hear Hazbin be rhymed, and this is what's so genius about this. If you sign and cash in with the Vees, it is inevitable that you will become what? A Hazbin, like that girl was. You will have your 15 minutes of fame, and then you will be thrown away. So when Charlie sings, that's the Hazbin Guarantee, this isn't like interrupting with some unrelated other thing, right? They are giving their own what? Their own Hazbin Guarantee! They are guaranteeing that you become the Hazbin, so it's about which Hazbin Guarantee you want to sign up for, Charlie's or Vox's. But now, before we talk about the storytelling lesson for this section of the song, I just want to thank my patrons and my YouTube members once again for supporting me. By joining them, you get exclusive behind-the-scenes looks at my VTuber musical theater project and early access to all of my videos. More people joining on Patreon or YouTube membership means that I could post more frequently and I wouldn't have to worry about whether or not a video does well. And so if any of that interests you, consider joining them. You can also commission me to do a deep dive video on your favorite musical theater song just like this, and so if that interests you, feel free to reach out to me through Twitter or Discord and we can use Ko-fi to make that happen. But to talk about my key storytelling lesson for this song, we have to revisit my complaint from Happy Day in Hell. This song has a lot of problems, but the fatal flaw is something that is the source or the nucleus of all of the problems, and if this was fixed, everything else could have been fixed too. An opening number is a promise to the audience, but it's not just showing the characters you're meeting, the conflict or the setting or anything else I said at the beginning of the video. It also makes a promise about the theme. all opening numbers need a thesis, a thematic question that will be answered by going on this journey. Hazbin Hotel has storybook narration and then an opening number. Beauty and the Beast also has opening narration and an opening number. And in combination, these things make us wonder, could Belle be the one who loves the Beast since Belle is treated differently and she feels like an outsider too, just like him? Will Belle leave her provincial life behind and find what she's looking for in Beast's castle? Will Gaston be able to force Belle to marry him? Belle sets up the stakes and the conflict, but it's not just about the surface level conflict. It's the central conceit of why we are here, and it makes us reflect on whether we're more like the townspeople or whether we're more like Belle. Are we accepting of people? Have we been accepting of people in the past? Do we make snap judgments about other people based on their appearances and how they look? In Hunchback's opening number, we have what makes a monster and what makes a man. Seeing Frollo and Quasimodo's backstory as a baby, his parents and everything like that, calls the idea of justice into question, and it makes us wonder if Frollo can be reformed by Quasimodo, right, by adopting Quasimodo and change his ways, or if he wants Quasimodo to bend to his will. People see Quasimodo as the monster, but we will realize that Frollo is the true monster here, and it makes us think, is Frollo right? Is Quasimodo right? How do we treat people that look like Quasimodo? How do we treat people that are in power like Frollo? Has there ever been a time where we have done something that we knew that thing was wrong, but that person was in the position of authority, so shouldn't they know best? Shouldn't they be right? It challenges our own behavior once again and makes us reflect, showing us that sometimes people in power that we treat with reverence are corrupt, and then the people that we ostracize from society have more empathy and kindness and are more human than those corrupt people. In Honor to Us All from Mulan, it is heavily implied that the people in town think a girl can only bring honor by marrying well. Girls don't go to war, boys go to war for you, the girl. Men want girls with good aesthetic tastes who are calm, obedient, and thin, apparently. And the visuals show us how Mulan is clearly different. She glances at this game board and makes a strategic move in seconds. The boys are bullying this girl and they steal her doll away, and she swiftly rescues it and gives it back to that little girl. This song establishes those thematic questions of there is more to Mulan, but will she try to pursue that? Can a woman be more than a wife and a bride? Will anyone give her the chance to be more than this, or will she give herself the chance? And more explicitly, is there a way for Mulan to bring honor to her family by being her true self? And it makes us reflect on our own ideas about gender roles. Have we changed ourselves at all to be what our families want us to be like? Have we given up or hidden away parts of ourselves to be normal and avoid disappointing the people that we care about? You'll notice in all of these cases, there is a big finale number that wraps up the thematic question, or in the case of Mulan, a script, because it stops being a musical when we see that everybody was brutalized by the Huns. Happy Day in Hell does not properly introduce the world, the characters other than Charlie, or the true conflict, and it also does not pose the thematic question. It doesn't challenge the audience at all. This could have been an opportunity to go, you probably judge these people harshly, but they aren't all bad just because they sinned. Or you probably sinned in the same way that they did, but guess what? You're judging them because they're in hell. What's gonna happen to you when you die, huh? But instead of challenging our behavior and making us reflect, the show goes out of its way to confirm the audience's worst preconceived notions about the sinners in the song. When you think about the finale, how many themes from the finale are actually in Happy Day in Hell? Because if you look at the other finales I talked about earlier, Bells of Notre Dame or the finale of Beauty and the Beast, Tale as Old as Time, you'll see that they very clearly answer the thematic question. The inclusion of the finale song is an answer, and it's telling the audience what we found out on the way here. So when you think about it, they make a callback to Happy Day in Hell in the finale, but do they foreshadow the finale in Happy Day in Hell? The finale checks in with pretty much every character and shows us how they are reacting to the aftermath of the conflict and the resolution of season 1, trying to reinforce the impact of the journey that everybody went on, despite the fact that none of the characters were actually in the opening number song. We don't see a clear before and after. This is how they were in the opening and this is how they are at the end. We just slowly have them appear throughout the season. The ending feels a lot like by joining together to fight against the common enemy, the people can rise up against their oppressors. The fact that people in hell fight for life to be better and defend each other in battle proves that anyone can be redeemed. None of that is even alluded to in the opening. Happy Day in Hell, for it to have a point, needs a thesis, which means it needs thematic questions. But the only thing we get is the finale answering questions that were never asked. The opening sets up Charlie's journey, but does not establish how anyone else is involved in that journey, other than Vaggie, I guess. And because of that, it can't establish the themes of the show properly. And then I gave the suggestions that I did earlier about making everyone's issues connected under that theme of Happy Day in Hell. But unlike Happy Day in Hell, this song clearly establishes the theme for this season and how everyone is involved under that theme, and involved in the journey of this season in general. It sets up how the Vees will be in direct opposition to Charlie, with Vox literally stealing someone directly from the hotel crowd. But it also sets up the ideological differences in how they will mirror each other throughout the season. Even though there's a lot we can talk about in terms of the themes or messages of Season 2, to me one of the biggest questions that is asked in this opening and throughout the entire season is, what is the point of being a good person? Is being good worth anything? What is a good life or a good afterlife? And does being a good person mean that you'll have a good life? Charlie's core flaw this season is in wanting to be perceived as good rather than actually do good. She is so determined to make people see who she truly is that she acts unlike herself, as I mentioned before. If Charlie was truly selfless and had no personal stakes in this matter, she would continue to redeem people regardless of what Vox is saying about her. But she totally drops the ball when it comes to helping the guest that she does have to obsess over Vox instead. Because he is threatening the reputation of the hotel, and by extension her and the legacy of Lilith and Lucifer. She cares about people, of course, but it all goes back to her wanting to fix her family. I would also go a step further and say that Charlie wants to validate that her own existence is not a mistake, that there is this destiny that only she can fulfill, friendships that only she can forge, people that only she can help guide and help to change, because of her unique nature as being part of all these worlds, yet belonging really to none of them. Charlie is part angel, but heaven sees the half-demon. She's part demon, but hell sees the half-angel. Her mom was human, but Charlie's not human, and she's never died. She didn't live, really. She doesn't really know anything about living and dying like humans do on Earth. So I think in Charlie's head, her thought process is, well, I have to be the bridge in between all these worlds, right? And if I'm not, what am I good for? Anyway, she thinks that Vox has all this control over her, but in reality, as we talked about before, she doesn't. He only makes a fool out of Lucifer because Lucifer is being a fool, and the same is true with Charlie. Charlie's actions always spoke louder from the get-go, but Vox was driving her to act ridiculous. She doesn't think she can forge that legacy through action, especially with Vox trying to tarnish it. But this is proven wrong when Emily and Charlie save the sinners in the finale. It is Emily and Charlie's willingness to die for their convictions that convinces Carmilla and Zestiel to change sides, whereas Vox doesn't truly stand for anything. He was just saying whatever to get people on his side. Though they didn't do it for that reason, how they save Vox's supporters starts to change how people see Charlie compared to Vox, especially when Vox is literally killing his own people without caring. When Charlie takes the right type of action, it is louder than the people criticizing her. I know I talked about some of that before, but I bring it all up again because of how it connects to Vox. In a way, Vox's core flaw is wanting to be perceived as anything but himself. We see this in Bad With Us as he chameleons into musical genres of the other overlords, and in Vox Populi where he ping-pongs between whatever ideologies serve him in that moment. One minute he says that hell doesn't need a king, and then the next he says he's the king of hell. And this also extends to being the person that Alistair wants him to be. If Vox was a truly logical villain, he would be emotionless about all this. It doesn't matter how he takes over heaven or with who. He would keep doing what has always worked, because he would want the end result. But it was never about getting absolute power. It was about Vox being seen by Alistair. And we really see this in the treatment of the Vees, where Vox almost wants to be perceived as like more villainous than he actually is. By this, I mean with how he treats Velvet and Valentino in front of Alistair. Maybe he has been using them the whole time. You know, a lot of people have different interpretations of like, does Vox actually care about the Vees? Was he just using them because they benefit him? Whatever, right? And so you can like choose your choice on that, but either way, he starts to act differently because of how he wants to be perceived by Alistair. If Alistair would respect him more if he acted this way, that's who he becomes, and this causes their plans to slowly fall apart until they betray him at the end. My personal take, if you're wondering, is that I think that he likes them. Like, he likes being around them. He does consider them as friends. He's not like, oh man, I fucking hate Velvet in private or whatever, right? Like, he does enjoy their company, but I think to truly care about and love someone, you must be willing to sacrifice for them, and I don't think that Vox is willing to do that. So I would say that he doesn't truly care about them. He would care if someone else did something to them, but he would never prioritize them over himself. So when it comes to this idea of perception and reputation, Vox now believes the only way for Alistair to see him is by conquering hell and heaven without the other Vees. True power would be Vox doing things however he wants because he calls the shots. He says what is truly villainous and grand and intelligent and cunning and whatever, not doing whatever Alistair thinks that he should do. But he can't escape wanting total control over how Alistair perceives him. Charlie breaks free from this idea that her legacy is controlled by Vox, that she has to change Vox's perception in order for it to be true, objectively a fact, if you will. But I don't think Vox even realizes that he's in the box. He is the frog in the well who is sure he's in the ocean. He doesn't realize that in order to truly best Alistair, he has to stop admiring him so much. Basically, he is still playing Alistair's game, instead of creating a new one where he makes the rules and he decides the win conditions. And that would finally be true power, but he just can't let go. Back to this idea of being good though, Vox would tell you that being a good person is not worth it. The Vees give us this pretty bluntly with why be nice when you can be famous. The money, the power, the fame is what makes their afterlives worth living. Even though Vox clearly craves genuine connection, friendship is not really within his control. He may even think that by giving those three things to the Vees, that is the only way to make sure that they don't leave him, by having a friendship that is based on a need that only he can fulfill. You can be friendless and good, or have whatever Vox has and be bad. And it's not just about what he has now, but that through continuing to be bad, there is, I think in his mind, the opportunity to win Alistair back. Whereas if he stayed as Vincent, that door would have been permanently closed. He only got to where he is today by taking the personal feelings out of it. And beyond Vox and Charlie, we can see how this idea is threaded throughout the episodes with the other characters. Like, what is the point of Angel trying so hard when it doesn't matter? He has no agency, no control over his actions, and he betrayed his friends anyway, so why even try? Sarah wants to atone, but a few episodes later tries to backtrack with, and this is why I was right all along. Actually, I didn't do a bad because of people like you. Though obviously she doesn't double down on it afterwards. It's a nice insight into the rightness and the goodness being attached together. Pentious is a big one too. He did a good thing, but now he's miserable. It's when Sarah and Pentious decide their own win conditions, so to speak. Charlie breaking free of Vox's, Vox never escaping Alistair's, game and like the way to win. With Sarah and Pentious, Sarah says it's up to her. She has to be sure in her heart that she is doing the right thing. It can't be based off what God expects from her. We see Husk choosing to self-destruct on purpose because it's better than being vulnerable and good, etc., etc. We get Charlie's vulnerability in the oomph, as I already mentioned. And this means we as the audience know how Vox is going to attack her. It is inevitable, but we will still be surprised as it all unfolds. But Vox also has an oomph that we haven't talked about yet. The juiciest part of the song comes at the very end when Vox slips up and says, "Trust me instead of us." When I heard that line during our reaction, I immediately knew that Vox was going to push the Vees away and that we were going to see his downfall. It perfectly captures what Vox's truest desire is, but also his deepest fear. And though the vulnerability gets deeper the more songs in that we get, in this moment you instantly understand the connection between those two words and the little bit of backstory that we got during Stayed Gone. If only Alistair had trusted Vox. I think that when Vox sings "Trust Me," it's not just about wanting to have control over everyone. It's wanting to validate that he was objectively right. And so Alistair is the last person that remains that Vox needs to hear those words, "I trust you, I was wrong," from. Similar to what Vox represents for Charlie, as long as Alistair still exists, he represents the idea of doubt, and so everything that Vox does this season is in pursuit of extinguishing that doubt in any way he can so he can finally shine the brightest. The type of foreshadowing in this ending here is what we want. It is the surprising yet inevitable. We can see the end of Vox's arc coming from miles and miles away, but now we get to watch with that anticipation as we get promise on what was promised in the opening number. And in episode 1, after this song, this promise is reinforced. The audience gets reassurance on this promise. It's not like, the gun that didn't go off like the angelic security in season 1. When Vox pushes the Vees away later in the episode, that is the show signaling to us, hey, we didn't forget about this thing or put it here for no reason. You are going to see progress on it, and so that is our first moment of progress. Happy Day in Hell was focused on the wrong things, which means they had the wrong thesis, which means that we had wonky promises. But the promises in this song are the right ones. They connect with the theme and they actually pay off. All along, what we really needed was specificity of storytelling. Whereas last season, it felt like the songwriting team didn't have the full scope of the information in terms of what the season would end up becoming, or the backstories for certain characters that we'll talk about another day. It feels like the songwriters were truly part of the storytelling process here, and that they were brought in early. And if you want to know what we thought about the rest of this season, and somehow you haven't seen our reactions or discussions, consider checking them out. But if you want to watch another song discussion video, check out this video about the storytelling problems with whatever it takes. I can't believe how many new ones there are now that we got Carmilla's backstory in season 2, but again, how a song can become worse somehow over time is a topic for another day. This has been Calxiyn caring way too much, and I hope now you care too.